On the night of August 31st, 2025, at 11:47 p.m., the mountains of Asia slept in ordinary quiet. Few suspected that something hidden beneath the earth would soon upend the lives of thousands. For the next 90 seconds, the ground trembled, leveling entire villages and taking more than 2,000 lives. Tens of thousands would become refugees in one of the world's most difficult countries. The mountainsides gave way, with massive landslides and avalanches blocking roads and severing contact with the outside world. Rushing streams of debris washed away bridges, leaving survivors trapped as rescuers struggled to reach them. But that was only the beginning. While responders labored to cope, aftershocks exceeding magnitude 5 struck and forecasts grew grim. Why did a relatively modest earthquake, a magnitude 6, turn into one of the deadliest natural disasters? What details made the event so uniquely challenging? And most importantly, why do scientists warn that this is only the opening act and that even harsher shocks lie ahead? Most people know this country for wars and political upheavals in the headlines, but few realize a geological time bomb lies beneath. Afghanistan sits in Central Asia, on the northeastern fringe of the Iranian mountains. Its history traces back to the Middle Stone Age about 40,000 years ago. Armies of Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, the British Empire, the Soviet Union, and the United States have passed through. In the last 3 decades, it has scarcely left the news, shaped by ongoing conflict. From Soviet interventions to the 2001 campaign to expel the Taliban, the country's story has repeatedly unfolded on the world stage. The region's tectonics are as dramatic as its politics. In the east, where the provinces of Hangu, Har, and Kunar meet, lie some of the planet's most active faults, where the Indian tectonic plate presses against the Eurasian plate and builds pressure that must eventually find an outlet. That outlet arrived on the 1st of August 2025 at 11:47 p.m., one of the most catastrophic events in Afghanistan's modern history. A magnitude 6 earthquake wiped out villages in minutes, claiming more than 2,000 lives. Yet the shock lay not only in the toll. Magnitude 6 is considered relatively moderate, a level that occurs worldwide more than 100 times each year and rarely yields such devastation. In developed nations, these quakes might damage aging buildings and cause few casualties, but Afghanistan faced a vastly different outcome. The epicenter lay about 27 kilometers from Jalalabad. Minutes after the main tremor, the first reports began to arrive. People in Kabul panicked and rushed from their homes, though the capital lies more than 150 kilometers from the epicenter. Shocks were felt across neighboring Pakistan and India, but the full scale of the disaster only became clear at dawn when rescuers reached the worst-hit areas. The scene before them stunned even the most seasoned rescuers. Village after village lay in ruins, where homes had stood only heaps of rubble and clay. Under these wrecks, hundreds remained trapped. And this was only the beginning, because 20 minutes after the main shock, the earth shuddered again, followed by a sequence of aftershocks. This was the onset of a nightmare. The most decisive factor turning a relatively moderate quake into catastrophe was how homes were built in Afghan villages. Walls of river stones held together with clay mortar, roofs of heavy rammed earth, and wooden beams with no metal frames or seismic reinforcement created a deadly trap. In Kunar province, 98% of buildings were damaged or destroyed. The second factor was timing. The quake struck at 23:47 local time in the deep of night, while most slept. The third factor lay in geography. The affected districts lie in mountainous terrain where seismic waves behave especially treacherously. Mountains act as amplifiers, concentrating and reflecting the waves, while soft river sediments in the valleys intensify ground motion. The fourth factor was the quake's unusually shallow depth. Its focus lay only 8 kilometers beneath the surface. That depth is exceptionally shallow by geological standards, since most devastating earthquakes occur at depths of at least 15 to 30 kilometers or more. Taken together, these elements explain why a relatively modest quake caused such devastation. The depth of the Chiga quake is like the distance from the epicenter to the surface. The closer the source is to the surface, the stronger the shaking on buildings and people. When a quake originates deep underground, seismic waves lose energy as they traverse thick crust. At a depth of only 8 kilometers, the waves reach the surface, almost unattenuated, preserving their full destructive power. This transformed even what would be considered a relatively weak earthquake by world standards into a local catastrophe of monstrous scale. For homes that could withstand a weaker, deeper quake stood no chance against such a near-surface strike. The tremor triggered a cascade of secondary disasters as rugged, unstable terrain began to crumble. Massive landslides blocked mountain roads, isolating the afflicted village. Muddy flows washed away bridges and filled valleys. Within 20 minutes, the first aftershock, magnitude 4.5, struck, followed by others. In the first day, there were more than 10 aftershocks of varying strength. For buildings damaged by the main quake, these aftershocks delivered a fatal blow, and structures that had withstood the initial shock finally collapsed. Panic-struck residents fled what remained, setting up open-air camps, yet danger persisted as aftershocks triggered new rockfalls and debris. In remote mountain villages, there was little rescue equipment or trained personnel, so relatives and neighbors cleared rubble with their hands or simple shovels. When dawn arrived on the 1st of September, the scale of disaster was clear. Dozens of villages along the mountain gorges lay ruined or were cut off by debris. Emergency authorities quickly realized that conventional rescue methods would not suffice in such terrain, where narrow mountain trails barely allowed passage. Helicopters became the only feasible means of delivering aid, though landing sites were scarce and rescuers had to hover and lower teams along exposed routes amid ongoing aftershocks. 2 days into the operation, on the evening of the 2nd of September at 9:56 p.m., a fresh quake struck, the aftershock measuring 5.2, interrupting rescue work and renewing panic. The new shock collapsed already damaged buildings and again blocked roads rescuers had just begun to clear. Several rescue teams were cut off in the mountains, yet the earth kept trembling. On September 4th, another quake struck, magnitude 5.6, followed the next day by one of magnitude 5.2. The aftershock sequence became a grim trial for survivors, who now feared not only collapsing buildings but simply sleeping. The international response to the disaster was rather restrained. The main problem followed the regime change in 2021, when most countries halted official aid to Afghanistan. The European Union and the United Kingdom pledged funds, but they were to be channeled through partner humanitarian organizations, avoiding direct contact with the government. The blow was felt most acutely in the reduction of American aid. In early 2025, the administration suspended humanitarian contracts totaling more than $1.7 billion, leading to the closure of numerous hospitals and clinics when they were needed most. By September 4th, it was clear the disaster's scale had been underestimated. Official fatalities rose from 800 to 2,000, More than 6,000 homes were destroyed, and about 84,000 people were affected. Afghanistan sits at the heart of the Alpine tectonic belt, a vast zone of active plates. This region accounts for about one-fifth of the world's largest earthquakes. The process began 40 million years ago when the ancient Kayentedis closed, and since then energy has periodically released as destructive quakes. In the last 125 years, the region has experienced numerous earthquakes of magnitude at least 5. Yet, the September 2025 quake demonstrated that even weaker tremors can be deadly under adverse conditions. Some scientists propose a more complex mechanism. A 2008 study suggested earthquakes may be linked to the detachment of blocks of ancient oceanic crust that still subduct into the mantle along the eastern part of Afghanistan. As large chunks detach, the stretched crust rebounds, deforming fault networks and triggering new quakes. Eastern Afghanistan crosses several active fault systems, including the Chaman Fault and the main Pomir Thrust. These structures act as colossal seams in the crust, periodically tearing and releasing the stored energy. Of particular danger is the Pomir-Gendukush zone, a region of deep seismicity in the east. Here, earthquakes regularly reach depths of up to 300 kilometers, a rarity for intracontinental regions. Such deep earthquakes typically occur in subduction zones where an oceanic plate sinks beneath a continental plate. The history of seismic disasters in Afghanistan reads like a chronicle of human tragedy. In 1998, a devastating earthquake struck the northeast, claiming tens of thousands of lives. In 2002, a magnitude 6.1 quake in the north brought loss of life and widespread destruction. In 2015, a powerful quake did not stop at Afghanistan, striking neighboring Pakistan as well. In 2022, a magnitude 6.1 tremor hit the provinces of Khost and Paktika, killing more than 1,000 people. In October 2023, a sequence of strong quakes included a 6.3 magnitude tremor, yet caused only limited damage in the Gujarat provinces. And now the 2025 quake ranks among the deadliest in the country's modern history, with geologists warning that tectonic processes in the region persist, and new devastation seems inevitable not only here, but in neighboring states. The only path to reducing casualties lies in a radical reform of construction practices. Examples from neighboring nations show this approach is possible. After the Kashmir earthquake in 2005, Pakistan established a dedicated agency to help people build safer housing. In Nepal, after the 2015 quake, the government introduced a minimum building code to ensure even ordinary structures can withstand seismic forces. But such reforms demand time, resources, and political stability, and millions of Afghans still live above one of the region's most dangerous fault lines, in homes engineers call future rubble. The ground beneath continues to accumulate energy for the next, potentially more destructive tremor. That is all.